What is up, everyone? It's your boy Edgar Ibarra. Thank you so much for joining me this evening on Filmspiration: The Process. If you haven't done so, please hit that subscribe button as well as that little notification bell. That way you're notified next time I make a new video. So I wanted to talk about two topics. Well, one topic basically being story, which encompasses story and execution of story, and the reasons why I wanted to hit this topic tonight. First and foremost, I want to say it's been an absolute blessing to be able to go back to work after COVID. Last week I worked from home. This week, finally, I'm back out in the field, and it's just been a blessing to be supported by such a great team of people I get to call my coworkers, um, my awesome superiors, all the great people that I basically just get to interact with. Nothing but supportive after COVID, and now thankfully life goes on. And I get a little, probably my biggest thing is I get a little winded, like for example when I take out the garbage, or if I go and pick up the dog poop, like I get just a little bit more winded than usual. Hopefully that goes away. um, but and that's why they say, like, everyone who gets past COVID, like, just because you're past it doesn't mean you're fully past it, depending on what sort of pre-existing conditions you might have had, or complications because of COVID, et cetera. So it's going to vary from person to person. But anyway, story. So let's jump into story. There are two reasons why I wanted to talk about story tonight. So the first is a Netflix original movie called Vampires versus the Bronx. Oh man, this was such a cool movie because um, basically it was one of my favorite things about it was that it had so much Afro Latino representation, and basically the story was heavily woven within the story of the world of the Bronx within that story. And yes, vampires. So vampires going into the Bronx and everything that happens in response to that. The story was fun. This is not a serious movie, so the story was fun. It was goofy. It was quirky at times. Frankly, I wanted that goofiness and that fun and the quirkiness of that fun to be taken a little bit more over the top, but it still worked. It was still a kick-ass movie with a lot of great cameos. Um, it was like a Latino Goonies, but with vampires and in the Bronx. And so, no major special effects, no, the world's blowing up or anything like that. It's about three young men in the Bronx, and one has the objective of basically trying to create, I think it was a block party, to save one of the bodegas, one of the corner stores, from going out of business in the face of gentrification that's moving into the Bronx. So that's how that story's set up. But how everything else develops and lays out, I'll let you check that out. But that movie was just so fun to watch because it was all in this one neighborhood of the Bronx. I'm not familiar with the Bronx, so I'm not even going to try to tell you like what part it was and whatnot. But it was just that's what it was. It was the Bronx, and the story was just, it was unfolding, and it was fun to watch while it was unfolding. Kept me entertained. Check that one out. Another one I just saw, and I finished watching this probably about an hour and a half ago after the vice presidential debate. This movie was called, and here, it's also a Netflix original movie. And both of these, by the way, I'm going to put the links for the trailers in the description of the video. This one is called My Octopus Teacher. Okay. It's a documentary. Now, this one goes, I'm going to go a little deeper with this one, for certain reasons. And if you watch both movies, you're going to see why I'm going a little deeper with My Octopus Teacher. I thought it was My Octopus the Teacher. So it's a Netflix original. It's a documentary. Um, I forgot exactly what part of the tip of South Africa. There's like a, it's, I think the character call it a coral forest or a reef forest, something like that. I know I'm screwing it up, but just check out the movie. You'll figure it out. You also figure out how I'm screwing it up. And so anyway, it's about this guy, and he's a filmmaker, from like, back in the day, and then he lives basically on like right up against the ocean. And so he develops a relationship with like the coral reef area by going and diving every single day because he was trying to basically rediscover his love for, the ocean and the world around him. Um, and then he meets an octopus. Like it was a little octopus that could probably grab and wrap itself around maybe half of your arm. And so you think at the onset, oh, okay, a documentary about a guy and an octopus. Okay, how interesting can that be, right? And it was just those two characters, and then the guy's son, but he didn't even have any, like, it being a documentary, he wasn't even being interviewed. He was never interviewed. He was in the B-roll a small handful of times, but for the most part, it was this guy telling this story about how he was falling in love with, the coral forest, I think it's called, right when he goes down to the beach outside of his house in South Africa. And this goes back to the power of story. Now, here's why story is important to me and execution of story. Let's lay the groundwork for when I say execution of story. Like I'm talking about, things like, when I say execution of story, I'm really talking about like, the performances or was the camera work good? Did the editing make sense? Did it just was it executed well to look, sound, look, and look, sound, look? Was it executed well to look, s- sound, excuse me, and feel like a movie? And that's what I mean by execution. Nothing, because sometimes I've seen productions that maybe could have done a better job on just those basics, like some of the performances, the sound, the lighting, um, the camera placements, the editing, and so you see when that's there, you see when there could be improvement. And by the way, let me just get this out of the way. Also, I'm not I'm not sitting on a high horse trying to think that like my movies are like the best ever and whatnot. I'm very proud of my films, but they're not perfect, so I'm not gonna that's not why I'm talking from this point of view. So that established, my movies are not perfect either. And then even the ones that like are even up in big Hollywood, like you're always going to have somebody that's going to talk smack, critiquing, criticizing. I didn't do this, I didn't do that. Sometimes those criticisms are justified. Other times it's just people, uh, you know, blowing smoke out of their rear end. So back to the octopus, or what was it called? The octopus, my teacher, my octopus teacher. Okay, this guy and this octopus again. Um, his kid's in the movie, but only in B-roll. Certain scenes. But it's literally like this guy, and he dives into the ocean, and he does this day after day, and he basically creates a relationship with like an octopus, gains its trust, and then the octopus starts to trust him, and so he goes back every single day to see this octopus, and the team, this documentary documents. I think it was close to like a year of this octopus's life, and a year, maybe more, maybe a little less. I'm definitely not going to tell you like what happens toward the end of the film, what happens at the end of the film. Check it out for sure. But the thing is that to take the concept of a guy telling you the story of his relationship with an octopus and the way that they laid this out. Now, granted, it's a Netflix original, so they have like awesome camera work. With, by the way, the photography, spectacular. Editing, beautiful. Just a really, really well laid out story. And again, one guy, bunch of B-roll of his relationship with this octopus that he created. Um, and you'd think, like, how interesting could that be? It's a guy and an octopus. He goes diving every day. Great, right? It goes pretty deep. It goes pretty deep. It takes some twists, some turns. Again, shot around, I'm gonna say it was shot around, just under a year, just over a year. But the depth and the power of the story that came out of this relationship for the most part with this one guy, this octopus, and the surroundings that he was discovering that the octopus lives in, the world of the octopus, and the relationship and the respect and admiration that he gained for that world that the octopus would live in, that he would dive into every single day. Um, it presented, you know how they say in storytelling, you got your act one, your act two, your act three, your turning point one, your catalyst, your midpoint, your big gloom, your climax, your resolution, etc. Um, it has all of that. And I never like I was shocked because I actually brought the dogs into my office, and then I went back and my wife's like, "Hey, let's watch this." And she never, documentaries, never her thing. Never her thing. And so I was a little surprised, and I told her, like, I was a little surprised that she put on a documentary. And so we saw this movie, and again, just back to the story. Netflix made a documentary about a story about a guy and an octopus. And it sounds, on the onset, it sounds super simple. Maybe it might even sound, hopefully it doesn't sound lame to you, because it was a really well told story, very well executed. In this case, not performances. There was no acting. It was a documentary, so it was an interview, um, and a lot of B-roll, a lot of beautiful, beautiful photography. Kudos Netflix team. Uh, but like, they made a freaking story about a guy and an octopus, and it just goes to show you that if you have a story, if you have, in this case, one person and an octopus, but one guy telling his story about this, or his relationship with this octopus, um, that, was there a story there? Yeah. To my surprise. I mean, I never really would have expected there to be a story. There was a story there, and it went deep, and it had its moments, and it was just a well told story. Um, I would have never expected that. But here's the thing, story needs to be there. I mean, all of you who have ever picked up a camera and, you've tried to do things with best special effects, maybe not so much. Maybe you're trying to tell more human-based stories. I don't know. You know that a story needs to be there, and you know that the execution needs to be there. Execution needs to be on point, needs to be good. You at least have to reach for excellence, as one of my former writing teachers used to say. He would say, there are movies that reach for excellence and attain it. There are movies that try to reach for excellence and maybe don't quite get it, but at least you saw that effort for excellence. And then there are movies that just kind of are like, like, why bother trying for excellence? So this movie reaches for excellence, and um, it just goes to show that, like, when you reach for excellence and when there is a story that is there to be told, oh man, like, beautiful things can happen. Beautiful things can happen, and at its core, I'm literally talking to you about a movie with one guy on camera, the interviewee, our main guy, and then the octopus. Obviously, it doesn't say a word. It's a documentary. Um, but the story needs to be there. The story was definitely there in this case, but the story needs to be there, because I saw a movie with, hell, I can't even remember the name because of how unengaging this film was, but it was with Alec Baldwin and Salma Hayek, and I think they're playing um, a couple who had been giving off the impression that they're rich when they're really not, and they send their daughter off to college. They're actually bankrupt. Um, it was I didn't get more than 15 minutes into that film because it was just goofy. It was dopey. It was like, like, I gave it a shot, but afterwards, it's like, you guys know the way it is. There's just so much stuff on Netflix that, like, it's like, okay, next, like, this sucks, next, next. And it was one of those. But we're talking about, like, a movie that cost God knows how much more because they had two amazing name actors in there. But the story wasn't there. The story wasn't engaging. Um, there was nothing to hook me in. It was kind of like a goofy, off the wall comedy, that type of thing. It was a little campy, but I'm down for that too. But just hook me in, just keep me there. That movie, I don't even know what it's called. Didn't even have me. But this other movie did. And when there's a story there, everyone, that's just the best. When there's a story, nothing about it for me has to be perfect, because, like I said, there's always going to be some, you know, idiot out there who's going to want to criticize and talk smack. And most of the time, let me be very blunt about this, most of the time, the people talking that shit are people who've never picked up a camera. So they're more like just critics, you know what I mean? So I kind of like to pay attention to who's talking the smack. because if it's somebody that's, giving off some criticism, hopefully it's constructive, but more importantly, hopefully the person giving off that constructive criticism is somebody who knows what they're doing, who has the authority or who's qualified to give that constructive criticism, hopefully. Then I'll pay attention to what they got to say, and the same thing applies for my work too, Um, so, there's always going to be somebody that's going to talk smack about, this movie sucked or this movie was great and whatnot. I think this movie got like 8.5 stars out of 10, but the story was there, you guys. The story was there all the way. Um, gosh, because of how the story developed between this guy and this octopus. And I want to talk very briefly about like story and why story and execution need to be there. Again, execution, the second part encompassing, let's just kind of wrap them up together. Performances, or the acting, uh, lighting, shooting, audio, et cetera, right? So like if all those things are done well and effectively and woven together effectively, it should have an effect. And and so when I've seen people, step into filmmaking, but they don't give a damn about those things. And if you don't care about those things, then good luck hanging in the game, because very few people, very few people see the status or the rewards that that were commonly associated to like Brad Pitt or Angelina, like all the big names, basically, the fame, the money, etc. There's like I'm willing to bet that that's such a tiny percentage, tiny, tiny percentage of the people that are actually all out there hustling, whether or not you hear about their movies, whether or not their movies make it onto Netflix. And so what I'm getting at is a lot of people, yeah, money would be definitely nice, right, as a reward, but you have to understand that it's going to take some time to at least get there. It's at least going to take time to get there, is what I meant to say. And so, till then, if you don't have a passion for story, if you don't have a passion for the good execution of all the elements that go into that story to tell that story, then good luck. You know, it's there have been very few movies that I've ever made. Myself, right? None of my movies are perfect. There have been very few of them where I'm just like, damn, this is a really perfect movie. None of them. And so there have been, some movies where I'm just like bedazzled at first, but then, like the Rise of Skywalker, then somebody's got to say, well, here's why it sucks. And, and then I hear them out on, their criticisms about, or pointing out the holes in the story. And then, I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, that's true, and that's true, and that's true. So then I'm just kind of a little disappointed, and I feel kind of a little dumb that like I was so jazzed at first, but I didn't see the holes. And then, because usually most times first time around, I'm letting myself enjoy the movie. I'm not analyzing the heck out of it. So, when you have story, and good execution of the elements that go into that story, that's the best right there. And then everything else kind of falls into place. Oh, here's where I was going with my thought. I've also like so I've never really had those stories where I myself, and my movies, I'm sorry, where I myself am like, damn, like that's like the most perfect movie that I've ever made or that I've ever seen, referencing one of my movies. I've not made that film. I've not made that film. And I hope to never claim something so arrogant. And so, you know what I mean? I'll say like, damn, my movie's like I'm pretty proud of it and whatnot. But even at the highest of Hollywood levels, again, Rise of Skywalker, the Christopher Nolan Batman series, like people have their criticisms, and people have their, so part of it is like, okay, I'll hear somebody out on like, okay, here's what's wrong with the story, right? Or here's what's wrong with this, or here's what's wrong with that. I'll listen to them, and part of me will be like, okay, so is the critic somebody who's just kind of running their mouth to sound intelligent, or do they actually have a point? Um, sometimes it's one, sometimes it's the other. Uh, but my point is that, when you analyze story and you have a good story, a strong story, not a perfect story, let go of perfect. Perfect is the enemy of good. When you have a story that's just the best, and that has to be there, because if you're not passionate about the story, if you're not passionate about dominating the basics, just the absolute basics. Let's say if you have no money going into a project, and but you have a small cast and crew, or maybe, hell, one person to make a short film with, and all you can do is buy them something off the dollar menu to make sure that they're fed, and you give them a gallon, like, if it's that if it's that low budget, if it's that grassroots, that's okay too, because you can do amazing things if you have a story, if you have good execution. um, when you don't have those things, then good luck hanging in the game for, again, other things like ego, or somebody thinks that they're so awesome that, like, they're like a big time baller or player in the film game, and but they don't care about, like, the basics of story. Those are the people I stay the hell away from, because those are the type of people that don't care about the basics. You should care about the basics: story and execution of all the elements that go into that story. Anyway, now I'm going in circles. I caught that a long time ago, actually. So I'm going to go ahead and cut me off like a person at the last call. And yeah, you guys, just stick strong, hold strong to the basics of telling a good story and executing on all the great and basic elements, with or without money. Elements being execution of acting, lighting, camera work, editing, audio, etc. Like, dominate the basics, and then first tell a damn good story, like this documentary, The Octopus Teacher, or My Octopus Teacher. um, you know focus on dominating the elements of telling just a good story. And man, that's the best. That's the foundation of what we're doing. We're hardwired as a human species to tell stories, to receive stories, to want to hear stories, to want to hear a good story too. From the days of the caveman, when they used to draw on the walls, storytelling. Tell stories around the campfire, storytelling. um, when papyrus started being written on, to pass down knowledge, information, words on paper, storytelling. um, Storytelling has, and it's morphed. Obviously, the printing press later on in the 1800s, the advent of the radio, that's storytelling also. The songs on the radio, storytelling. Maybe it's a talk show, storytelling. Um, Television, of course, then cable, then the internet. It's all storytelling, you guys, just in different forms. And in different forms, I mean, like, when you're telling journalism versus narrative film, obviously there's a difference, right? But at its core, you're still telling a story. You're still telling a story that needs to be told for whatever reason. It's a story. And so, dominate story, you guys. That's all I got for you. Dominate story, dominate the elements that go into the unfolding of that story. You know, um, Truth be told, I wish I could produce a short film a week, a short film every 4 months. I'll get back to that as soon as I finish this film coming up pretty soon. And yeah, just story. And if, I encourage you to solidify those foundations, solidify those things, you're set. You guys, everyone, thank you so much for hanging out for this. Was that a rant? I don't know. Whatever. You know what? Here's what it is. Here's what it is. It's great information that I need to remind myself of also. That's why, I kind of like do this in a very healthy type of selfish way, because I benefit from, these messages that, I'm not just trying to preach here. I'm also reminding myself, hey, I got to live by this. I've got to do this stuff on my own. So you know what? Hold tight to those basics of storytelling, of execution of all the elements that go into the storytelling, and create that solid foundation, that effective foundation. And then, where you go, I don't know, I can't tell you, but with those fundamentals dominated, you're unstoppable. Everyone, thank you so much. If you haven't done so, please hit that subscribe button as well as that little bell. That way you're notified next time I make a new video. I love you guys all. I'll talk to you guys later. And yeah, bye.